As the Second World War progressed, tanks became increasingly beefier, pushing infantrymen to devise new strategies for destroying them. Germany urgently sought to deploy additional anti-tank weaponry due to the escalating numbers and sizes of enemy tanks they confronted. Among anti-tank weapons, one stood out despite its limited range, modest stopping power, crude aiming, and single-shot capability. It was the German-designed Panzerfaust or Armor Fist, which has attained a legendary status. Introduced in 1943, the Panzerfaust epitomized the wartime conditions, reflecting the turning tide against Nazi Germany as its once seemingly unstoppable military encountered assaults from all directions. Cost-effective to manufacture and easy to use, the Panzerfaust provided individual infantrymen with a potent weapon capable of neutralizing enemy armor. With a projectile velocity ranging from 45 to 60 meters per second and a firing range of 60 to 100 meters determined by the variant, this weapon was exclusively designed for short-range combat. German soldiers had to approach Allied tanks closely before unleashing their fire. Consequently, German anti-tank units found their greatest effectiveness in urban environments or wooded areas, where ample cover facilitated stealthy approaches. In the hands of a proficient marksman, a well-aimed Panzerfaust fired from the correct angle and hitting an Allied tank in a vulnerable spot had the potential to ignite the fuel tank or ammunition and kill the entire crew with just one shot. When under attack, tank crews had only a split second to react and evacuate the tank. Those who managed to escape often suffered severe burns, while those unable to flee faced the horrifying prospect of being reduced to nothing more than ash and bone fragments by the engulfing flames. Allied tank crews on the Western Front during the 1944 campaign found the Panzerfaust to be one of the German Army's most lethal weapons. Stuart Hills, a British tank commander, detailed his first-hand encounter with the Panzerfaust in his book, Tank Into Normandy. He gained a close-up perspective of its effectiveness while engaged in combat in northern Belgium in the lead-up to Operation Market Garden. Stuart Hill's tank crew, belonging to the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry, participated in the advance into the Belgian city of Geel on September 9, 1944. Initially, the most intense combat fell upon the infantry units, providing support to the advancing tanks. In the fields surrounding Geel, they encountered a German emplacement of MG-42 machine guns. Hills witnessed an officer being virtually cut in half as he bore the brunt of a belt of bullets aimed solely at him. Initially, Hills was relieved to be inside a tank. His Sherman tank, along with 3 others accompanying him, soon neutralized the German guns, allowing them to advance into the town of Geel without encountering any further incidents. The Germans had abandoned the city, and the townspeople rejoiced in the British liberation of their town, displaying their Belgian flags from their windows in celebration. Within hours, the British soldiers received news that the Germans had launched a counterattack, encircling the town and cutting off the British troops' escape route. As a result, the civilians removed their flags from the windows in response to the escalating danger. As night fell, the British consolidated their tanks in defensive formations within the town square. Soldiers maintained vigilant surveillance along the side streets. The initial German attacks proved ineffective. In a daring move, one of the British tanks successfully destroyed a Jagdpanther tank destroyer at close quarters. The remainder of the night passed relatively calmly, with fighting subsiding on both sides. As dawn broke the next morning, the tank adjacent to Hills erupted into flames. The driver lost his life in the explosion, while the tank's commander, Captain Jimmy McWilliam, managed to escape, but sustained severe burns in the process. Hills reflected that survival in a Panzerfaust attack often boiled down to sheer luck. Hills was gripped with horror as he witnessed McWilliams' ordeal, fully aware that he might soon face a similar fate. Despite having the powerful firepower of a Sherman tank at his disposal, he found himself unable to identify a target to engage and was disoriented, unsure of where to direct his attention. Roughly 2 minutes after McWilliams' tank was engulfed in flames, Hill's tank was hit. Firing in the general direction from which they believed the shot had originated, they hastily retreated into the main square, feeling thankful that they could move at all, amidst the chaos of battle. Remarkably, the only injury sustained by the crew was a minor scratch on Hill's forehead, caused by a piece of shrapnel. The tank's driver, Bob Engel, had a brief glimpse of the German soldier just before he fired the Panzerfaust. Engel distinctly felt the blast reverberate through his legs. Upon inspecting the damage later, they discovered that half of the starboard side track plate was missing, and a hole had been blasted through the sprocket assembly into the differential. Had a co-driver been present during the mission, the likelihood is high that he would have either lost his life or suffered severe injuries, potentially resulting in the loss of his legs, given the extent of the damage inflicted on the tank. The remaining tanks withdrew from the town, leaving behind the scene of intense combat. It would take 6 days of relentless fighting before the British forces could successfully recapture the city once more. The encounter with the Panzerfaust haunted Stuart Hills for decades, inflicting upon him recurring nightmares filled with despair and terror. However, he found solace and strength in overcoming these haunting memories by reflecting on the courage and unwavering support demonstrated by his fellow soldiers during that harrowing experience. The Panzerfaust was essentially a recoilless rifle, capable of propelling a small yet potent shaped charge over distances of up to 200 yards. A direct hit from this weapon could be devastating, as its warhead had the capacity not only to explode but also to unleash a jet of scorching metal into the tank's cabin, posing a lethal threat to the crew and potentially igniting the fuel or ammunition stored within. Early versions of the Panzerfaust were capable of penetrating up to 5.5 inches of steel, with subsequent German upgrades enabling it to pierce nearly 8 inches of armor. Meanwhile, the armor thickness of the T-34 turret was approximately 3.5 inches, while the M4 Sherman boasted up to 3 inches of armor. This significant overmatch in penetrating power could instill terror in Allied tank crews, as they were acutely aware that a direct hit from a Panzerfaust often meant the end of their vehicle and potentially their lives. The Panzerfaust, while straightforward to operate, demanded that the operator be in close proximity to the target tank. Consequently, the weapon proved increasingly effective as combat shifted to Germany's towns and cities, where Allied and Soviet tanks found themselves navigating through narrow streets. In such urban environments, the Panzerfaust's short-range capabilities and devastating power made it a formidable threat to enemy armor. Allied armored crews soon realized that if the enemy engaged their tanks at close range, their fate was often sealed before they could react. Fortunately for tank crews, the Panzerfaust had a significant limitation. It was an infantry weapon with a range typically between a few dozen yards and 200 yards, and the longer-range variants were not deployed during the war. As a result, tank crews could engage and neutralize Panzerfaust teams from distances well beyond the anti-tank team's effective range. However, tank crews could capitalize on their range advantage only if they could detect the anti-tank teams beyond the weapon's effective reach. Panzerfaust teams often employed tactics such as concealing themselves in brush or trenches, lying in wait for tanks to approach, or stealthily maneuvering through buildings to strike the tanks from close range, posing a persistent threat even at short distances. Indeed, the Panzerfaust emerged as Germany's most effective weapon against tanks at close range, accounting for approximately half of the Allied tanks destroyed in short-range engagements. In the final months of the war, up to 70% of Allied tanks fell victim to Panzerfaust attacks, underscoring the effectiveness of the weapon and the bravery of those who dared to wield it. Remarkably, the Panzerfaust demonstrated nearly equivalent effectiveness to dedicated anti-tank guns, requiring just over twice as many shots per tank destroyed, despite having significantly lower logistical and training demands. Several variations of the Panzerfaust were developed, including those with larger warheads and extended ranges. Despite producing approximately 6.7 million units, the Panzerfaust ultimately failed to alter the course of the war significantly. The semi-experimental Panzerfaust 150M notably influenced the design of the Soviet RPG-2. Subsequently, during the Cold War era, many nations recognized the value of cost-effective, single-shot anti-tank weapons in providing infantry with an effective means to counter enemy armor, as exemplified by the Panzerfaust.